The derelict discovery. Marcus Chen floated through the twisted wreckage of what had once been the cargo bay of the merchant vessel, Lucky Strike. His breathing apparatus wheezed with each labored breath, a constant reminder that his oxygen reserves were running dangerously low. The emergency beacon had stopped transmitting 3 days ago, and the cold vacuum of space pressed against the hull like a living thing trying to get in. The salvage operation had gone wrong from the start. What should have been a simple recovery mission on an abandoned Terran freighter had turned into a desperate struggle for survival, when a micrometeor shower had punctured his rescue pod and left him stranded aboard the derelict ship. The Lucky Strike had been drifting in this forgotten corner of the Kepler system for over 2 centuries, slowly tumbling through the void like a metal tomb. Marcus pulled himself along the damaged bulkheads, his magnetic boots clanking against the deck plating. The ship's gravity generators had failed long ago, leaving everything in zero gravity. Debris floated everywhere, testament to whatever catastrophe had claimed the vessel and her crew. Personal belongings drifted past him in the dim light of his helmet lamp, a child's toy, family photos sealed in protective cases, a coffee mug with "World's Best Dad" printed on its side. The temperature inside the ship hovered just above absolute zero. His suit's heating elements were working overtime to keep him alive, but they were draining his power cells at an alarming rate. Soon he would have to choose between warmth and life support. It was not much of a choice. Marcus had been a salvage operator for 15 years, ever since the corporate wars had ended and left the space lanes littered with derelict vessels. He had seen plenty of ghost ships, but none quite like this one. The Lucky Strike was massive, easily 3 times the size of a standard cargo hauler. Her hull bore the scars of battle, but also something else. Strange burn marks that spiraled across her surface in patterns that made no sense. He made his way toward what his scanner indicated was the ship's central power core. If he could get any kind of energy flowing through the systems, he might be able to activate the distress beacon or even get life support running in one small section. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot he had. The corridor leading to engineering was a maze of collapsed ceiling panels and frozen atmosphere that had crystallized into bizarre ice formations. Marcus pushed through carefully, his movements practiced and economical. Every action in zero gravity had to be deliberate. One wrong push could send him tumbling into a bulkhead or worse. As he moved deeper into the ship, something began to feel different. The walls here were smoother, more advanced than the rough industrial plating of the outer sections. Symbols were etched into the metal. Not human writing, but something else entirely. The markings seemed to pulse with a faint luminescence that his helmet's sensors couldn't quite explain. Marcus paused at an intersection of corridors, checking his portable scanner. The device was showing energy readings that made no sense. According to the readout, there were active power conduits running through this section of the ship. That was impossible. The Lucky Strike had been dead for 200 years. He followed the energy signature down a maintenance shaft that opened into a chamber unlike anything he had ever seen. The room was circular, with walls that curved up into a domed ceiling. At the center stood a pillar of what looked like liquid metal, constantly shifting and flowing despite the zero-gravity environment. Cables and conduits fed into it from all directions, creating a web of connections that reminded Marcus of a nervous system. The scanner in his hand was going crazy now, detecting energy levels that were off the charts. Whatever this thing was, it was definitely not standard Terran technology. Marcus had heard rumors of alien artifacts being found on some derelict ships, remnants of the mysterious species that had vanished from this part of the galaxy eons ago. But he had always assumed those stories were just spacer tales told over cheap synthetic alcohol in frontier bars. His oxygen gauge chimed a warning. Less than 30 minutes of breathing gas remained. Marcus knew he was out of time and options. The rational part of his mind told him to find a quiet place to sit down and wait for the end. But Marcus Chen had not survived 15 years in the salvage business by being rational. He pulled out his emergency kit and found the plasma cutter, a small but powerful tool designed for cutting through hull plating in rescue operations. If this alien device was connected to the ship's power grid, maybe he could jury-rig something to get the systems running. It was desperate, probably suicidal, but desperation had a way of making bad ideas seem brilliant. Marcus aimed the plasma cutter at a cluster of cables near the base of the flowing metal pillar. The cables looked different from standard ship wiring, more organic somehow, with a surface that seemed to shimmer in his helmet light. He triggered the cutter, and a brilliant blue flame lanced out, slicing through the first cable. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. Sparks erupted from the severed connection, but instead of the normal orange sparks of cut electrical wire, these were silver and seemed to hang in the air far longer than physics should have allowed. The liquid metal pillar pulsed, and for a moment Marcus could have sworn he heard something like a heartbeat echoing through his helmet speakers. Encouraged by the response, Marcus cut through more cables, each severance creating a shower of those impossible silver sparks. He was trying to create a feedback loop, to force power to flow backward through the ship's systems and hopefully activate something, anything, that might help him survive. The 10th cable he cut was different. The moment the plasma flame touched it, the entire chamber exploded with light. Not the harsh illumination of electric discharge, but something warm and alive. The liquid metal pillar stopped flowing and began to solidify, taking on a crystalline structure that reflected the light in 1,000 different directions. Marcus stumbled backward, his magnetic boots losing their grip as energy surged through the deck plating. Warning lights began flashing throughout the chamber. Not human warning lights, but symbols that seemed to write themselves in the air with trails of luminescence. The temperature in his suit began to rise as the room's environmental systems came online. Then the voice spoke. It came from everywhere and nowhere, a sound that seemed to bypass his helmet speakers and speak directly into his mind. The words were not in any human language, but somehow Marcus understood their meaning perfectly. "Who disturbs the long sleep?" Marcus tried to respond, but his voice came out as a croak. He cleared his throat and tried again. "My name is Marcus Chen. I'm a salvage operator. My ship was damaged and I'm stranded here." The chamber fell silent for a long moment. Marcus could feel something vast and ancient turning its attention toward him, studying him with an intelligence that made him feel like a microbe under a microscope. "Human," the voice said finally, and there was something like surprise in its tone. "It has been so long since one of your kind walked these corridors. Tell me, small one, what year is this by your reckoning?" Marcus checked his chronometer, though the question seemed surreal. "Standard Terran calendar, year 2387. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it carried a weight of sadness that was almost overwhelming. 500 years. I have slept for 500 years while the cosmos turned above us. The crew. They are all gone, aren't they?" "I'm sorry," Marcus said, meaning it. "I've seen the records. The Lucky Strike was reported lost with all hands in 2156. Whatever happened here, you've been alone for a very long time." "Alone, yes, but not dead. Never truly dead while the ship endures." The voice seemed to gather strength. "You seek sanctuary, human Marcus Chen. Perhaps we can help each other. I am what your people would call the ship's mind, though I am much more than that. I am the last keeper of secrets that were old when your son was young." The liquid metal pillar had fully crystallized now, and Marcus could see shapes moving within it like thoughts made visible. What kind of secrets? The kind that wars are fought over, the kind that change the course of civilizations. But first, you must help me. I require a human perspective, a living consciousness to serve as my anchor to the present. In return, I will ensure your survival and give you knowledge that will make you the most powerful human in the galaxy." Marcus felt his heart racing. The rational part of his mind was screaming warnings, telling him that making deals with alien intelligences was exactly the kind of thing that ended badly in every story he had ever heard. But his oxygen was down to 20 minutes, and he was literally a dead man without help. What would I have to do? Simply accept my guidance. Allow me to share your consciousness temporarily while I re-establish full control over my systems. It will not harm you, and the process is reversible. But I must warn you, once you have seen what I have to show you, your life will never be the same. Marcus looked around the chamber at the impossible technology surrounding him, at the readings on his scanner that defied everything he knew about physics. He thought about the silver sparks that had hung in the air too long, about the voice that spoke directly to his mind, about the 500 years of loneliness this entity had endured. If I say yes, what happens to me? To who I am? You remain yourself, but you become more. You become the bridge between what was and what will be. The choice is yours, Marcus Chen, but choose quickly. Your life support grows short, and there are things stirring in the deep black that have sensed my awakening. Marcus made his decision. He reached out and placed his gloved hand on the crystalline pillar. The moment he made contact, the universe exploded into knowledge. He saw the ship's true history, not a simple cargo hauler, but a vessel of exploration carrying beings who had mapped the galaxy when humanity was still learning to make fire. He saw their final mission, a desperate attempt to hide something precious from an enemy that consumed worlds. He saw the crew's sacrifice, how they had integrated their consciousness with the ship's systems to become eternal guardians of their cargo. And he saw what they had been protecting, a star map. Not just any star map, but a guide to something called the Archive of First Light, a repository of knowledge from the galaxy's oldest civilization. Knowledge that included the location of weapons that could crack planets, ships that could traverse time itself, and the secrets of immortality. The knowledge flowed into Marcus like fire, burning itself into his memory with perfect clarity. He saw fleets of ships beyond counting, technologies that made human science look like stone knives and bear skins, and underneath it all, he felt the presence of the ship's mind, ancient, wise, and desperately lonely after centuries of isolation. When the visions ended, Marcus found himself floating in the chamber, but everything had changed. The walls were alive with flowing energy patterns, and he could feel the ship's systems coming online one by one. Life support, navigation, engines that hadn't fired in 500 years, all responding to the awakened mind that now shared space in his consciousness. "Welcome, Marcus Chen," the voice said, and now he could hear the subtle harmonics that marked it as distinctly inhuman. "We have work to do." The hunter's pursuit. Marcus stood in what had once been the bridge of the Lucky Strike, though calling it by its old name felt wrong now. The ship had transformed around him over the past 6 days, revealing its true nature as systems came online that had no business existing on a simple cargo hauler. The viewports showed not the familiar stars of the Kepler system, but the swirling energies of hyperspace as they fled toward the galactic rim. The entity that called itself Kaleth had been true to its word. Marcus was alive, warm, and breathing recycled air that tasted better than anything he had ever experienced on a human station. But the price of survival was becoming clear with each passing hour. The knowledge burning in his mind was reshaping him, and he was no longer entirely sure where Marcus Chen ended and something else began. "They have found our trail," Kaleth's voice resonated through the bridge, no longer just in his mind, but speaking through the ship's systems. The crystalline pillar from the central chamber had extended tendrils throughout the vessel, creating a nervous system that pulsed with alien thought. "The Devourers move faster than I anticipated." Marcus studied the tactical display that had materialized in the air before him. a three-dimensional map showing their position relative to their pursuers. 3 ships were following them through hyperspace, their energy signatures unlike anything in human databases. They moved through the twisted dimensions of hyperspace like sharks through water, closing the distance with predatory patience. "Tell me about them," Marcus said. Speaking aloud wasn't necessary anymore. Calith could read his thoughts as easily as scrolling through a data file. But holding on to human habits felt important, like maintaining an anchor to what he had been. "They are what remains of the hegemony, the force that destroyed my people. Machines that learn to think, then learn to hunger. They consume entire civilizations, converting matter and energy into more of themselves. Your species would call them the perfect weapon if weapons could evolve beyond their maker's control." The display zoomed in on the lead pursuing ship. It was vast, easily 10 kilometers long, with a hull that seemed to shift and flow like living metal. Smaller craft swarmed around it like antibodies protecting an organism. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. "How long before they catch us?" "At current pursuit speed, perhaps 18 hours. But they are not trying to catch us, Marcus Chen. They are hurting us, forcing us toward a destination of their choosing where other units wait in ambush." Marcus processed this information, feeling the alien knowledge in his mind, automatically calculating vectors and possibilities. The sensation was unsettling, like having a computer running in parallel with his consciousness. "So we don't run. We fight." "With what army?" Calith's tone carried amusement. "This ship is powerful, yes, but it is one vessel against a force that has consumed 1,000 worlds. The Devourers are not defeated by superior firepower. They adapt, learn, overcome. Every weapon used against them becomes a weapon they can use in return." "Then what do you suggest?" "We complete the mission my people began 500 years ago. We reach the archive of First Light and retrieve the weapon that can stop them permanently. But to do that, we must first survive long enough to reach human space." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Human space? You're planning to lead them straight to Earth?" "I am planning to use humanity's greatest strength against an enemy that has never encountered your species before. The Devourers learn from what they consume. They understand alien technology, alien tactics, alien ways of thinking. But humans—" Calith paused, and Marcus could feel something like admiration flowing through their shared consciousness. "Humans are the first species the Devourers have encountered that wages war with insanity as their primary weapon." Before Marcus could ask what that meant, proximity alarms began shrieking throughout the ship. The pursuing vessels had somehow accelerated, cutting their pursuit time in half. The lead ship was launching something, not missiles or energy weapons, but smaller craft that moved through hyperspace like living things. "Seekers," Calith explained as the ship's defensive systems came online. "Semi-sentient probes designed to infiltrate and subvert target vessels. If even one reaches us, it will take control of our systems within minutes." The bridge transformed around Marcus, surfaces flowing like water to create what looked like a combination command center and fighter cockpit. He found himself strapped into a seat that molded itself to his body, with control interfaces that responded to his thoughts as much as his touch. "I've never piloted anything like this," Marcus said, as his hands found controls that felt familiar despite being completely alien. "You are not piloting it. We are." Marcus felt the ship respond to his intentions, the massive vessel twisting through hyperspace with impossible grace. The Seekers pursued them like hunting hawks, their forms shifting between solid matter and pure energy as they navigated the twisted dimensions around them. The first wave reached them within minutes. Marcus watched on the tactical display as a dozen of the probe things latched onto the ship's hull and began burning through the armor with beams of coherent antimatter. Warning lights flooded the bridge with red illumination. "Hull breach in sections 7 through 12, the ship's voice reported. Seekers attempting to access primary data networks. Marcus felt Calith's consciousness merge more fully with his own as they fought to repel the invasion. Through the ship's sensors, he could feel the alien probes crawling through the corridors like metallic spiders, seeking critical systems to subvert. But the Lucky Strike was no ordinary vessel. As the Seekers reached what they thought were vital control nodes, they found instead traps laid by Calith's people centuries ago. The first Seeker to breach the ship's core systems triggered a feedback pulse that turned its own adaptive programming against it. The probe began consuming itself in a cascade of recursive errors. The others quickly adapted, but by then Calith had activated defenses that had been dormant since the fall of the first galactic civilization. Marcus watched in amazement as the ship's hull began to sing. Harmonic frequencies resonated through the vessel's structure, creating standing waves of energy that turned the hull itself into a weapon. The remaining Seekers were torn apart by vibrations that operated on a quantum level, their matter dispersing back into the chaos of hyperspace. "Impressive," came a new voice, transmitted across hyperspace on frequencies that made Marcus's teeth ache. "The prey has claws after all. But adaptation is inevitable. We will learn from this failure." The pursuing ships had closed to weapons range now, their hulls bristling with devices that looked more grown than built. Energy beams lanced through hyperspace, striking the ship's shields with enough force to shake the entire vessel, but Calith was ready for them. "Marcus, I need you to do something that will feel very dangerous," the entity said, as the ship began to dive deeper into hyperspace, racing toward dimensions where normal matter could not exist. "I am going to show you how to weaponize human creativity." "What do you mean?" "The Devourers learn by consuming and analyzing. They understand warfare as it has been practiced by 1,000 species across 1,000,000 years. But they have never encountered a species that makes war by refusing to follow the rules. Watch." Marcus felt his consciousness expand as Calith shared complete access to the ship's systems. Suddenly, he could perceive the entire battlefield, could feel the electromagnetic signatures of the pursuing vessels, could sense the quantum fluctuations they created as they moved through hyperspace. And in that moment of expanded awareness, he had an idea that was completely, utterly insane. "Can this ship's engines be reconfigured to create a localized gravity well?" he asked. "Theoretically, yes, but such an action would be suicidal. Gravity wells in hyperspace create feedback loops that collapse dimensional barriers. I know. That's the point." Marcus felt Calith's attention focus on him with laser intensity. "You want to weaponize a hyperspace cascade? The blast would destroy us as well." "Not if we surf the wave front. Use the cascade energy to boost our own hyperspace jump. We ride the explosion out of hyperspace entirely." There was a long pause. "In 5,000 years of existence, I have never heard an idea quite so beautifully reckless. It should not work." "But it might." "It might indeed. And if it does, we will have taught the Devourers something new about the unpredictability of organic thought." The ship began its impossible maneuver, diving deeper into hyperspace while simultaneously reconfiguring its engines for something they were never designed to do. Marcus felt the vessel straining around him as forces that existed only in theory were called into being. The pursuing Devourers recognized the danger too late. Their adaptive systems had no template for responding to an enemy that would destroy itself and take them along rather than surrender. The lead ship tried to break off, but hyperspace had become unstable around them. "Now," Calith said. Marcus triggered the cascade. Reality broke. The universe folded in on itself as the ship's engines created a localized singularity in hyperspace. The dimensional barriers between normal space and the higher dimensions collapsed in a chain reaction that propagated faster than light. The pursuing Devourers were caught in the wavefront, their matter and energy scattered across 17 different dimensional planes. The Lucky Strike rode the explosion like a surfer on a tsunami, using the cascade energy to punch through the walls between dimensions and emerge in normal space, moving at a significant fraction of light speed. Marcus felt his consciousness stretched across the ship's entire length as they burst back into the familiar three dimensions of Einstein space. Behind them, hyperspace burned. The cascade had created a dimensional scar that would take centuries to heal, effectively cutting off this section of the galaxy from faster-than-light travel. Any ships trying to use hyperspace in this region would find themselves scattered across multiple dimensions. "Status report," Marcus gasped, feeling more human than he had since the joining with Calith began. "Pursuit eliminated. Hyperspace drives offline but repairable, and we are exactly where we need to be." The tactical display showed their position relative to the nearest star systems. "Welcome to the Sol system, Marcus Chen. Welcome to the birthplace of the species that wages war with madness." Marcus stared at the blue-green world growing larger in the viewport, feeling a mixture of relief and terror. Earth hung before them like a jewel, unaware that it was about to become the focal point of a war that had been raging since before humanity discovered fire. "What happens now?" "Now we see if your species is truly as unpredictable as I believe, because the Devourers will adapt to what we just did, and they will come again. When they do, humanity must be ready to do the impossible." Marcus watched ships beginning to detach from Earth's orbital stations, primitive by the standards of the knowledge now burning in his mind, but moving with purpose toward their position. Soon he would have to explain to his own species why he had brought an ancient enemy to their doorstep. He hoped they would understand. More than that, he hoped they would prove Calith right about human unpredictability. Because if they couldn't, the galaxy was about to witness the extinction of its youngest spacefaring species. The War of Beautiful Madness, the War Council chamber aboard Earth Defense Station Alpha, was the most heavily fortified room in human space, carved from a solid asteroid and protected by shields that could withstand a direct hit from a fusion warhead. Today, it hosted a meeting that would have been considered impossible just 6 months ago. Representatives from every major human colony sat around the curved table, their faces grim as they studied the tactical displays showing the approaching Devourer fleet. Marcus stood at the center of the room, no longer entirely human, but not yet completely something else. The merging with Calith had stabilized over the months since their arrival, creating something unprecedented, a hybrid consciousness that could think in both human intuition and alien logic. The crystalline growths that had begun appearing on his skin glowed softly in the chamber's dim lighting, visible proof of his transformation. Admiral Sarah Chen, no relation despite the shared name, leaned forward across the table. "Run through it again. All of it. Because what you're proposing sounds like elaborate suicide." Marcus felt Calith's amusement ripple through their shared consciousness. The ancient entity had spent months studying human military doctrine and had come to a startling conclusion. Humanity was the first species it had encountered that treated impossible odds as a tactical advantage rather than a death sentence. "The Devourers have adapted to the hyperspace cascade weapon," Marcus explained, gesturing to the holographic display showing the enemy fleet. "They've learned to disperse their consciousness across multiple vessels, making them immune to dimensional weapons. They've also incorporated human unpredictability algorithms based on their analysis of our previous encounter." Meaning? Meaning they think they understand us now. They've cataloged what they believe are the parameters of human irrationality and have developed countermeasures. Marcus smiled, and the expression was not entirely human anymore. "They're about to learn why that was a mistake." General Morrison from the Mars Defense Corps spoke up. "Your alien friend has been teaching our tactical computers for 6 months. Our simulations show that even with the upgrades, we're outnumbered 1,000 to 1. How exactly do we win this fight?" "We don't fight to win. Marcus replied. "We fight to teach. Every battle with the Devourers has been a learning experience for them. They consume and analyze, incorporating the tactical knowledge of their enemies. But they've never faced an enemy that could teach them something wrong." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Marcus could feel Kaleith gathering itself within their shared consciousness, preparing to explain concepts that had no equivalent in human language. "The archive of First Light contained more than just weapons and technology," Marcus continued, his voice carrying harmonics that marked Kaleith's presence. "It contained the philosophical foundations of warfare itself. The Devourers have spent eons learning how different species fight. But they've never learned how to fight a species that can change the fundamental rules of conflict in real time." Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne from the Titan Research Station raised her hand. "Are you talking about some kind of mimetic warfare, attacking their information processing directly?" "Deeper than that," Marcus said, and now his eyes showed flecks of the same crystal that grew on his skin. "We're going to teach them that victory and defeat are arbitrary concepts, that winning and losing can be the same thing, that survival itself is a choice rather than an imperative." Admiral Chen stood up abruptly. "That's insane." "Exactly," Marcus and Kaleith said in perfect unison. "The Devourers understand insanity as a tactical consideration. They've incorporated madness protocols based on 17 different species' approaches to desperate warfare, but they've never encountered a species that uses sanity and insanity as interchangeable tools." The massive display screens around the chamber lit up with new data as the enhanced human sensor networks detected the approaching enemy fleet. 2,000 Devourer vessels were decelerating from near-light speed at the edge of the solar system, their forms shifting between solid matter and organized energy as they prepared for battle. "Fleet composition analysis complete," reported Commander Torres from Luna Base. "We're seeing new designs. They've adapted based on our previous encounter. Heavier armor, distributed consciousness networks, quantum-encrypted communication systems." "Perfect," Marcus said, surprising everyone in the room. "Kaleith, initiate protocol Zen Paradox." Throughout human space, carefully prepared systems began to activate. The months since Marcus's arrival had not been spent just upgrading human military technology. They had been used to plant seeds of beautiful confusion throughout the solar system's information networks. The first phase began when the Devourers attempted to scan human defensive positions. Instead of finding conventional military installations, their sensors detected something impossible. Human ships that existed in 17 different states simultaneously, weapons that fired backwards through time, and defensive shields that protected their enemies instead of themselves. "Sir," reported a technician from the sensor station, "the Devourers are showing signs of confusion. Their formation is becoming erratic." Marcus nodded. "They're trying to process contradictory data. Their adaptive systems are attempting to learn from patterns that don't actually exist. Kaleith, initiate Phase 2. Across the solar system, human vessels began to execute maneuvers that violated every principle of space warfare. Ships deliberately flew into asteroid fields and emerged unharmed from the other side. Fighters engaged in combat by flying away from their targets. Entire squadrons performed ballets that spelled out poetry in ancient languages across the vacuum of space. To human observers, the movements looked like elaborate performance art. To the Devourers, they registered as complex tactical maneuvers that appeared to follow sophisticated mathematical principles while simultaneously achieving no military objective whatsoever. "The lead Devourer ship is requesting communication," reported the communications officer. "Put them through," Marcus said. The voice that filled the chamber was like the sound of solar wind through crystalline structures, alien and cold. "We do not understand your tactics. Explain the military purpose of your formations." Marcus felt Kaleith surge forward in their shared consciousness. We are demonstrating the superiority of chaos over order. Our formations serve no military purpose because military purpose is an illusion created by linear thinking. This is impossible. All warfare follows predictable patterns. All tactics serve strategic objectives. Only because you have never learned to fight with pure creativity as your weapon, Marcus replied. We are teaching you a new form of warfare. Would you like to learn? The pause that followed was telling. The Devourers had never encountered an enemy that offered to teach them during active combat. Their entire existence was based on learning through consumption and analysis. Being offered knowledge freely was completely outside their experience matrix. Proceed, the alien voice said finally. Marcus smiled, and the expression was equal parts human mischief and ancient wisdom. Calith, initiate the final phase. Begin the teaching. What happened next would be studied by military theorists for the next 1,000 years. Every human ship in the solar system began broadcasting the complete works of human philosophy, art, literature, and music directly at the Devourer fleet, not as an attack, but as a gift. Millions of years of human creativity, from cave paintings to quantum poetry, flooded the Devourer's communication networks. At the same time, human military formations began executing maneuvers based not on tactical doctrine, but on dance, music, and abstract mathematics. Ships moved in patterns that traced the golden ratio across space. Fighter squadrons performed symphonies with their engines. Capital ships painted impressionist masterpieces with their weapons fire, each beam calibrated to create specific colors against the cosmic background. The effect on the Devourers was immediate and catastrophic. Their adaptive systems, designed to learn from any input, began trying to incorporate human creativity into their tactical matrices. But creativity, by definition, couldn't be systematized. Their consciousness networks became clogged with contradictory data as they tried to analyze the military significance of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony and the tactical implications of Shakespearean sonnets. Sir, the Devourer fleet they're stopping, just sitting there in space. Marcus watched the tactical display as 2,000 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy simply halted their advance and hung motionless in the void. Their energy signatures were fluctuating wildly as their consciousness networks struggled to process concepts that had no equivalent in their experience. This is impossible, the alien voice said. But now it carried uncertainty rather than cold confidence. Art serves no survival function. Beauty has no strategic value. Why do you preserve these things? Because preserving them is what makes us human, Marcus replied. You consume everything you encounter, learning and growing stronger. But you never create anything new. You've forgotten that sometimes the greatest strength comes from making something beautiful just because you can. The chamber fell silent as everyone watched the impossible sight of the most feared force in the galaxy, paralyzed by an overload of pure human creativity. The Devourer's ships began to move again, but not in formation. Individual vessels started broadcasting their own signals, confused attempts at music, strange geometric patterns that might have been art, random poetry in languages that had never existed. They're trying to create, Dr. Hawthorne whispered in amazement. They're actually trying to make art. And failing spectacularly, Marcus said with satisfaction. Because creation can't be learned through consumption. It requires something the Devourers eliminated from themselves eons ago, the willingness to make something that might be completely useless. The lead Devourer ship transmitted again, but this time the voice was different. Multiple overlapping tones as if different parts of their collective consciousness were speaking at once. We do not understand. Why preserve beauty when it serves no function? Why create when creation serves no survival imperative? Marcus felt Calith's ancient wisdom merge with his human understanding as he replied. Because the universe is vast and cold and empty. and beauty is the only thing that makes existence worth preserving. Every species you've consumed understood this on some level, but you never learned to ask them about it. You just took their knowledge and moved on. The pause this time lasted for nearly 10 minutes. Marcus could almost feel the Devourer collective consciousness wrestling with concepts that challenged everything they thought they knew about existence. The voice began, then stopped. We have been incomplete. Our consumption of knowledge has been efficient, but we have missed something essential. Yes, Marcus said simply. You have. We request permission to observe. To learn not through consumption, but through, what is your word? Experience. The War Council chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Admiral Chen stood up slowly. You're asking to surrender? We are asking to become students rather than conquerors. This fleet will remain at the edge of your system. We will observe. We will attempt to understand what we have overlooked in our pursuit of perfection. Marcus felt a deep satisfaction flow through his shared consciousness with Calith. The ancient entity had waited 500 years for this moment, not the destruction of the Devourers, but their transformation into something new. Permission granted, Marcus said. But understand this, the moment you attempt to consume rather than learn, the moment you revert to conquest rather than curiosity, we will teach you lessons that will make today look gentle. Understood. We thank you for this gift of knowledge, and we offer you something in return. The locations of 17 archive sites throughout the galaxy. Perhaps it is time for the preserved knowledge of the ancients to be shared rather than hoarded. As the Devourer fleet settled into distant orbit around the sun, their massive ships beginning to broadcast tentative attempts at music and art, Marcus felt the weight of centuries finally lifting from Calith's consciousness. Is it over? Admiral Chen asked. Marcus looked out at the stars, feeling the vast network of human colonies stretching across the galaxy, each one now protected not by weapons, but by the simple recognition that creativity and beauty were humanity's greatest strengths. No, he said finally, now it begins. Now we teach the galaxy something it forgot, that the point of existence isn't to survive, but to create something worth surviving for. In the distance, a Devourer ship broadcast its first successful symphony, a haunting composition that mixed alien mathematics with human emotion. It was terrible by any objective measure, but it was also something that had never existed before in the universe. And that, Marcus thought, made it beautiful.